Good morning, everyone. We will reconvene this meeting now, and before I ask Lynette to take roll call, I just would like to let you know that Regent Robinson sends his regrets that he is unable to attend this meeting. As we speak to the staff and compensation concerns, I will address some of the sentiment that he asked me to share. So with that, then I will ask you, Lynette, to take roll call. Present.
Present.
Regent Tuss.
Here.
Regent Steele.
Here.
Regent Williams.
Here.
Regent Krause.
Here.
Commissioner Christian.
Here.
And I don't believe we have anybody yet from the governor's office or representing the superintendent of juvenile.
Thank you, Lynette. We will move forward with the approval of the minutes from the meetings that you have listed. And unless there are objections, we will move forward with, I would accept a motion to approve all of them at once, unless there are amendments.
Madam Chair, so moved.
Thank you. A motion has been made. Regent Buchanan.
One quick note, and thank you. Regarding the last conference call meeting that we had, we talked about insurance benefits. I missed the call. I apologize. I wasn't there, but I'd hope to share some. I'd open a conversation that maybe I asked Kevin to plant into discussions down the road as that industry has changed, insurance and what providers are doing, what options are there. I would really like to have some board discussion related to what some of the options out there are, and would note those please in the minutes for the conference call. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan. Is there any further conversation regarding the motion from the members of the board? Any public comment? Any public comment? All in favor then, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Then at this time, what I would ask each of the campuses to do is introduce any new administrators or faculty that they have with them today.
Madam Chair, members of the board, it is my pleasure to introduce some new wonderful individuals who have joined Montana State University recently. First of all, I would like to acknowledge and to introduce our new CIO, Dewitt Latimer. Is Dewitt here? Yes. Dewitt comes from University of Notre Dame, and he will be helping us in making sure that our IT systems are even better and stronger in each of our 4 campuses. So, welcome. We also have with us some new deans that have joined us recently. First, we have our new dean of the College of Business, Dr. Craig Aids. He's right here. And of course, Dr. Aids, it's not only providing leadership to the faculty, students, and staff in that wonderful college, but he has his hands full with a new building project that it's about to be started very soon. We also have with us our new Dean of the College of Arts and Architecture, Dr. Nancy Cromwell. And she has been exceedingly well received by the faculty and everybody here. Am I missing anybody from MSU Bozeman or from any other of our campuses who are here with us today? And finally, we have a new interim director for extension, Dr. Jill Martz, who has devoted many of her years to 4-H. She's filling that capacity that Doug Steele left vacant. Moving to our other campuses, I'm delighted to finally introduce to you in person the new dean of the College of Great Falls at MSU, Dr. Susan Wolf. So welcome all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'd like to introduce some folks as well. Let me start with Dawn Ressel, who is our new Associate Vice President for Planning, Budgeting, and Analysis. Dawn comes to us with many years of system-level experience in the University of Kansas system, or the Kansas University system, I should say. So Dawn is in the back there. Dawn, thank you for joining us. I would like to also introduce Chris Fiore. Chris is this year's Leadership Fellow. Last year we put in place a program at the University of Montana to select someone from the faculty or the staff to be a Leadership Fellow for a year. Chris is that person. She's a faculty member in our psychology program at the university. I introduce Chris because it has particular relevance to you, because our last Leadership Fellow is Neil Moisey, and he is now serving on the staff at the Office of the Commissioner. I think we do have a couple of introductions from our other campuses. Chancellor Blackketter, do you want to introduce your folks?
Thank you, President Engstrom, Madam Chair. I'd like to introduce Bev Hartline. I think she's back there. Bev is officially not at work today. She will start October 1st. She is our Vice Chancellor for Research and our Dean of Students. So we welcome Bev from the University of D.C.
Thank you. Dean Bingham, did you have an introduction to me?
Yes, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Stern Sims, who is our our Student Services Dean, and she comes from Virginia, and we're really pleased to have her here with us.
And I don't believe Chancellor Story has any introductions to make. Is that correct? Okay, so maybe we could give a round of applause to all of the new people from both MSU.
Madam Chair, Chancellor Limbaugh also has a very important introduction to make.
A new dean at Montana State University Northern. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Christine Cremeen, who is the new dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Education, and Nursing. She comes to us from Black Hills State University, and we're very glad to have her with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Commissioner.
Madam Chair, at the Commissioner's Office, we have several new additions. Amy D'Amato is here serving as our board get everything done that needs to be done person. So welcome to her first meeting, and President Engstrom mentioned, but Neil Moisey now serving in the Commissioner's Office as interim Deputy Commissioner for the Research and Student Affairs Committee. So thank you guys. Anybody else from our group? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and welcome everyone today. And at this point then, I would like to expressly thank Chancellor Blackketter and all of his faculty and staff and his students for being such gracious hosts of all of us on your campus for the next couple of days. And so now I will turn it over to you for your remarks.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Commissioner Christian, MUS colleagues and friends, our campus and community is indeed honored to host the 2012 September Board of Regents meeting. Welcome to Montana Tech, home of the 17th ranked Ordigger football team. Yeah, and an 11-4 women's volleyball team. We just take that kind of thing for granted here at Montana Tech. And go Diggers. Founded in 1896 as the Montana State School of Mines, we have since sent nearly 13,000 graduates into the workforce. Within Montana, the nation, the world, Montana Tech and its heritage emphasis on responsible use of natural resources, particularly in environmental, mining, and petroleum engineering, has perhaps the most globally recognized Montana graduates. Montana Tech is also home to the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology. Since its establishment in 1919, the Bureau has held statewide responsibility in all 56 counties to, quote, collect and publish information on Montana's geology to promote orderly and responsible development of the energy, groundwater, and mineral resources of the state. The Bureau provides extensive advisory, technical, educational, and informational services on the state's geologic, mineral, energy, and water resources. Since you met here last, 2 years ago, we now have the new Highlands College, and though the building looks vaguely familiar, the College Now initiative is helping us renew our dedication to two-year education and workforce development. Currently, Montana Tech has slightly over 2,800 students from 39 states and 14 international countries studying in 40 programs focused on science, engineering, health, nursing, business, information technology, communications, trades, and technical education. In addition, Montana Tech has the largest dual enrollment in the MUS system. Our students are taught and cared for, and I mean cared for, by our outstanding faculty and staff. This past year, Some of the accomplishments of our faculty include a Fulbright Scholar, Pat Munday, the Millman of the Year from the Society of Materials Engineering, Courtney Young, and a named Montana water legend, Tom Patton from the Bureau. The faculty and staff matriculated 432 graduates this past year, giving 478 degrees and certificates, and garnered and expended nearly $9 million in research that is making significant contributions to the development of relevant research results and new technology. Again, a lot has happened to our campus infrastructure since you were here last. Our renovation is complete of the old petroleum building. It's right there. It's the greenish building, and is now our health sciences building, and houses our nursing program and our Institute for Educational Opportunities. The IEO, not EIO, IEO, the Institute for Educational Opportunities, includes our TRIO programs and impacts about 800 students, pre-college students in southwest Montana. The renovation of our health, physical education, and recreation building, the Hyper, is complete, minus a parking lot, soon to be completed. And looking out over the city and the Highlands Mountains in the background, when there's no smoke, makes our new cardio rooms a coveted place to break a sweat with 150 of your best friends. And we are nearing the grand opening right up the hill here of the Frank and Ann Gilmore University Relations Center, the first 100% privately funded building for Montana Tech. And as an aside, President Emeritus Chancellor Gilmore flunked retirement recently and is now the president of the Goldwater Institute in Washington, D.C. But with these new digs, as we diggers call them, along with all the landscaping and less visible remodels, our infrastructure is making a positive impact on how we educate our most prized asset, that is the students. And speaking of the students, allow me just a moment to brag on a few students. In 2011 and 12, Tech's Casey Clark was Montana's sole Rhodes Scholar finalist. And in 2012, Tech's Robert Hark was awarded one of 2 Goldwater scholarships in Montana. Former Tech women's basketball player Breanne McClafferty received NAIA's 2012 Charles T. Stoner Scholarship and is currently enrolled in law school at the University of Montana, Missoula. We are proud of our student athletes that collectively scored the second highest in the nation in the NAIA's Champions of Character 5-Star Award, an awards program based upon valuing integrity, respect, responsibility, sportsmanship, and student leadership. We are proud of all of our students. We are proud of our students who are active in nearly 50 clubs and professional societies, ranging from Engineers Without Borders to Montana's finest hockey college club. Thanks to our Canadians, eh? And just recently, U.S. News and Report released the Best College 2013 rankings, and Montana Tech earned the number 2 spot for the top public regional colleges in the West, behind California Maritime Academy. Montana Tech also landed the number 1 spot for public regional colleges' best value schools in the West. But even more important than U.S. News and World Report, employers recognize the quality of our graduates. Montana Tech has averaged a 93% placement rate over the last 10 years. Tech grads are certainly in demand. Again, we are honored to have you on our campus. Please stop and thank our staff who have worked very diligently to host this meeting. And as you get around campus, I encourage you to stop students, faculty, and staff and get directions, or to just get their take on Montana Tech. We are a friendly bunch and proud to be ore diggers. Welcome. And Madam Chair, just a few housekeeping things, if I may. For one, there's a hospitality suite. It's in the Highlands room over here, and this meeting is beamed into there, so you can go there. It also has some drinks and coffee and food and such for you if you want. I also want to mention to those who have RSVP'd for the reception at the Mining Museum that that's just right down Park Street all the way to the end, and then a little bit to the left below the Hyper there today. And as well, we're offering flu shots today in the Mill Building, okay? And it's covered by our MUS health plan. So if you get a chance, you can go over to the Mill Building, which is the building right on the very end, and get your flu shot. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you again, all of you folks at Montana Tech, for having us over the next couple of days. Before I move along in my comments, I would just like to take a moment to recognize Pete Donovan, who is here from the State Board of Public Education. Thank you. That is the Board of Regents' counterpart in K-12, and we are constitutionally supposed to meet at least twice a year. as a Board of Education together. So nice having you here. Additionally, I would like to express on behalf of the board our appreciation to the commissioner's staff for making sure that we all get here and that we're all taken care of. We appreciate the good work that you do. Additionally, as we begin another school year, I just want to signal our appreciation to the faculty and staff across the system for the good work that you do to make sure that we best serve the students in the Montana University system. We look forward to learning of all of the great things that are happening on your campuses throughout the course of this year. So thank you. Additionally, I would like to take a moment to celebrate some collaboration that has taken place and has landed an opportunity for both K-12 teachers as well as a significant opportunity for collaboration between Montana State University and the University of Montana and Montana Tech and MSU Billings in landing 2 OPI grants in regards to math and science. So I just want to congratulate all of the partners and let them know that we celebrate their efforts to collaborate on behalf of the students that we serve. And then I just have one other comment that I would like to make before we move on to some of the agenda items. I would like to address the issue that made last week's media cycle regarding the law professor at the University of Montana. First, I want to say that we are confident that President Ingstrom is handling the matter appropriately. Secondly, I would like to speak to the important issue of academic freedom and ensure all who are in the classrooms across the Montana University system that this board fully embraces and supports academic freedom. Whether it be student leaders seeking administrative support for power shift on their campus, or whether it be a faculty member who is critical of a policy or a politician, this board recognizes that either academic freedom exists or it doesn't. This board recognizes and believes that academic freedom is the cornerstone upon which we ensure that our students leave the Montana University system and upon their departure will be thoughtful, independent leaders because they have been exposed to a wide array of ideologies and belief systems. So with that then, I thank you very much for taking a moment to hear those comments. And now we can move on to the systems issues and reports. And I would invite Tyler Trevor from the Commissioner's Office to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, good morning. We just have a quick update for you on the legislative planning and preparation that we've been doing over the last year and a half and some of the things that are in progress right now, and just a real quick glimpse at the road ahead leading up until the opening of legislative session in January. So stepping back, immediately following the close of business last legislative session, we get the notice for the interim committee hearings and meetings throughout the session. So that summer, which would have been summer 2011, we start attending those meetings. And our primary interaction with legislators in these interim committee hearings, and in fact we had one last week, is with the Education and Local Government Committee. That we work very closely with them throughout the year. This is a meeting that lasts generally 2 days, where we have about half a day to talk about higher education issues. Some of the topics that we've addressed extensively with them are affordability, the update on the Affordability Task Force, student financial services, what we're doing in that arena. They were interested in our enrollment. I gave them the same enrollment report that I provided to the board in May. Definitely covering in detail our legislative initiatives. They followed those as they were being developed, as the board prioritized them. We kept them abreast of changes in those, and another area of particular interest was two-year education. Deputy Commissioner Seck gave numerous presentations related to the changes and efforts we have with College Now effort. And really just an overall great relationship with this group, very interested in higher education topics. In addition to that, we're continually monitoring a whole host of committee hearings and where we have various interaction with legislators. For instance, the Legislative Finance Committee, the Land Board, Revenue and Transportation, Economic Affairs, State Admin and Vet Affairs, to name a few. So that's sort of the ongoing process where we keep, from the Commissioner's Office, some pretty good relationships and interest going throughout the year with particular legislators. And moving on into more recent developments, we've been working on our system initiatives. We continue to refine strategies and tactics within those initiatives that the board has approved and prioritized. Underneath affordability and student financial services, you'll hear a detailed report tomorrow on some of the exciting things and a lot of progress that we've made in that area. Integrated information systems. We've spent the summer conducting a self-study on the campuses, hired a in-house consultant to help us with that project, to create an inventory of all systems and how that relates to our enterprise system on each campus. We have a report that I'll share with you at the November meeting. And then, of course, two-year education, we are all well aware of the progress that's been made there, and we're definitely poised to expand and maneuver with the flow of this project in kind of putting together a strategy with the legislature under two-year education. Associate Commissioner McCrae, in working with the chair of the board, has facilitated the early connections between regents and campus leaders and key legislators. He's focused these efforts around three primary areas that relate back to the strategic plan, related to economic impact that the university system has, affordability and efficiency, as well as value and excellence. And so we're really trying to get out there with some personal contacts, and the regents are well aware of those efforts. We've had on and off of the agenda an LRBP video, a long-range building and planning video that's about 8 minutes long that'll highlight the top 3 projects in the system and kind of give an overview from the angle of which we want to communicate with legislators and constituent groups. We've been touch and go whether or not we were going to show that today, but just weren't quite ready. We'll definitely have it polished up for the November meeting. I believe that some of the campuses will be using that throughout the month of October. It's a really exciting collaborative project. And then the road ahead, we're already starting to schedule leadership meetings with the campuses and the commissioner's office that are kind of our logistic tactical meetings that we have beginning this fall. We are definitely anticipating the release sometime in November of the governor's budget. That'll help refine our strategies, as well as the agreement on a pay plan, which again directs our strategies. And then, what we have here is just a whole lot of coordinated efforts, starting with the commissioner's office, engagement of the campuses, working with you, the regents, to kind of funnel that all into the beginning of the legislative session. And I guess that's 3.5 months away, so here we go. Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Tyler. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board? Thank you. And then at this point, then we will move to the consent agenda. Action on the consent agenda will take place tomorrow. This is a new model for our consent agenda in an effort to streamline our meetings. And so I would ask if there is any board member who would like to parse out parts of the consent agenda to their respective committees. Regent Buchanan.
Thank you. And this is new, caught my eye. Regarding the salary issues, I would certainly like to separate those when we consider them for action.
Thank you. Would you offer
Items A through I. And that would typically go to a staff and comp committee, but I don't know that we have that committee at all on the agenda, so I don't know where you intend to put that.
There is a placeholder in there for tomorrow, so we can move items A through I to the staff and comp committee agenda tomorrow. Thank you. Any other recommendations from the board in that regard? Thank you. Now we'll move on to the Budget Committee. We have a really full plate on this committee for this meeting, and I had originally planned to articulate the goals and the work plan for this committee. We've shared that with the committee. We've worked with the Commissioner's Office on that. And in the interest of time, I will save that until November, and I will present mine along with Major when he presents the staff and comp work plan and goals in the November meeting. I would ask all of the board members at the table to make sure that as we move forward in the budget conversation, it is a very lengthy conversation. And I did hear someone out in the hallway talk about getting out of here tonight around 7 o'clock. So we do need to be very attentive to the time. When it comes to Q&A, we have blocks of time marked in. And I would also ask that as the campuses begin their presentations that they are very aware of those time constraints. So at this point, then, we will turn to item A. It's an information item, and I'll look to Deputy Commissioner Robinson.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, we simply present as part of the Budget Committee agenda information for audit reports that have been received by our office, and we did receive two since the last meeting, audit report for KUFM Public Radio and Flathead Valley Community College. Both of those audits included unqualified or clean opinions. We have those available in our office if anyone has an interest in reviewing the details, and that would conclude my remarks on that piece.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, then we'll move on to the next item. And for that, I will look to Chancellor Blackketter. So until he comes back, then why don't we turn it back to you, Mick, for the next item?
We have a proposed draft policy, a new policy dealing with the procedure that we would be looking to use for the allocation of state funds as we move into the next biennium. This is a very rough first draft of that particular policy, and has just been sent out to the campuses for some review. We simply wanted to make it known to the board that we were working forward in this particular process, and the basic concepts that we're looking at is to use a 3-year average of resident student FTE in this computation. Based on that 3-year average, we would then allocate or distribute dollar amounts to the campus presidents, and the campus presidents and then will allocate those funds among their campuses. And that would be the process we would use for the next biennium. Subsequent to the legislative session completing their work, we would go through that process. We would bring that to the board probably in the May meeting of 2013 for approval and concurrence in terms of moving that funding forward. So we will be doing some additional work in wordsmithing, and there are some pieces that are probably missing in this policy that we'll have to make sure it's blended in before it comes back to you for final approval, perhaps in November or perhaps in January.
Thank you, Mick. Mr. Commissioner?
Madam Chair, maybe everyone's clear, but I think this policy would set out the guidelines for how we would compute those calculations, but the numbers ultimately would come back to the board every other year to be approved in terms of the actual allocations. So this will guide that process, but the board will actually, we anticipate a vote and an action item on those allocations every time that it's computed.
Thank you. Are there questions? Regent Krause?
No, not a question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, just that as we look at moving forward with the next biennium, keep in mind that we have been talking about performance budgeting and perhaps how that fits into an allocation model. I'm not sure that we go into detail, you understand, but I think that should at least be mentioned in the allocation policy as a possibility that there might be some holdback to incentivize the board's strategies that they share with the various campuses. So just might go in there somewhere as a paragraph placeholder.
Thank you, Regent Krause. Mr. Commissioner?
Madam Chair, Regent Krause, we absolutely anticipate those conversations will start in October, and we will look to probably even amend this policy at some point, but this will serve as what has been a void of policy at this point in time until that we make some headway on other models.
Regent Buchanan?
Madam Chair, thanks. I would support consideration to performance-based funding. It's something that boards before this board have prioritized and had a hard time gaining traction and getting it in here. And so as we do mold this, I would support the comments of Regent Tuss or of Regent Krause.
Further questions or comments from members of the board? Seeing none, I would just like to thank both President Cruzado and President Engstrom for being instrumental in making this conversation happen and producing even a draft document for us as a board to consider. So we thank you, and we thank you, Mr. Commissioner and Mr. Robinson, for your work in this regard. Now we'll turn it back to Chancellor Blackheader for discussion on item B.
I guess I was a little surprised. I should have been watching the agenda. My apologies, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is an informational item that has been going on for a number of years. When I came to Montana Tech a year ago, July, then Chancellor Gilmore was the PI on a grant that would take advantage of flooded mines that are here on campus, in particular the Orphan Boy and Orphan Girl mine, which are just west here of campus. And they received a grant, $1,073,000 approximately, to put that in place. And the summary is, you can read, I'm sure you've read the summary of that, but the bottom line is that we have now moved forward with phase 2, which is the implementation of a heat pump that will be set at about the 100-foot level in the Orphan Girl mine, and we'll have a closed loop system. The NRB, the Natural Resource Building that's on the end of campus, was designed originally to take advantage of that project as it came to fruition, with stub outs for return, exit and return water, coolant that would be provided to the building. So it's kind of a research project, kind of a construction project. We think it's a very novel. It has not been done in this particular capacity. To put that heat pump, we use off-the-shelf parts for the most part, but the design of and the implementation of some of those off-the-shelf parts. I am actually the PI on the grant. For a variety of reasons, I suppose because of my mechanical engineering background. We did have one graduate student that completed a project on it this last year. Rory Thornton wrote a thesis on it and completed. So we're in the process of putting that in. And I would be open to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chancellor. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Seeing none, I just want to thank you on behalf of the board for the innovation and the great ideas. Thank you. Now we'll turn to other discussion items on the board's agenda, the review of the budget metrics and questions. And again, I'll turn to Mr. Robinson and Mr. Trevor for this part of the conversation that will set us up for our conversation that we'll have after lunch.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, we'll try to move through this a little more quickly. Hopefully we can get it done before lunch, but we wanted to at least provide a framework for the specific campus presentations later today, and we will work through kind of an overview of the budget and the budget metrics that we prepare on an annual basis in terms of tracking issues, and hopefully they're used in the management of the campuses. To begin with, we do have some terms and definitions. I'm not going to go into those today in the interest of time, but those are there for your reference in terms of definitions of the various fund types we use within college and university accounting, and also some definitions that relate to the specific metrics. I would like to click on the all funds operating budget to take a look at a few of the the pieces that are on this budget. The action item for operating budgets for the Board of Regents is focused on this particular document. At the bottom of the budgeted fiscal year 13 column, there's a total that amounts to $1,399,438,688. That is kind of a level of spending authority that we are asking the Board of Regents to approve for the entire Montana University system, which would include, in the top portion, we have the educational units and research agencies. We have the community colleges and the various fund types connected with the community colleges. We have a tribal college assistance program where we distribute dollars to the 7 tribal colleges around Montana. There was a certain level of one-time only research funding that we have as a separate line item, and then the funding components of the various programs within the Office of the Commissioner. Just a couple of comments regarding some of the, maybe what you'd view as large percentages in the right-hand column. The community colleges, the plant funds, there's a 67% increase. I believe the majority of that is focused on a new building project proposed for the Flathead Valley Community College campus. Just a large project that will be hitting in fiscal year 13. The research funds, simply they were allocated more heavily to the second year of the biennium than the first. Within the Office of the Commissioner, state special revenue, 21% increase. The bulk of that is connected with the Rural Physician Incentive Program, the Mr. PIP program, in terms of a larger dollar amount estimating to be spent. That special revenue is generated by WWAMI students' contributions into that fund to help pay or provide an incentive for the repayment of loans for physicians that will locate in the rural areas of Montana. The other percentages, at bottom line percent, the total increase in spending authority being requested for the year amounts to 5%, and you can see the other expenditures. What we'll focus on in most of the discussion today is going to be the current operating unrestricted fund. Basically, in the campus is referred to as the general operating fund for the campus. You can see that the top line for the educational units and agencies. You can also see that for the community colleges. That is the fund type where we include all of the tuition, all of the state funding that comes to the university system. Also in the community colleges, you have the local mill levy that would flow into that particular fund. For the education units, you have the 6 mill levy that is part of the funding source for that current unrestricted fund. So the total spending authority that we'd be looking for approval from the board tomorrow is that $1,399,000,000 figure. The discussions, most of the discussions for the rest of the day will be focused on the current unrestricted fund and that operational activity within the campuses. If we could go to the next tab, the budget metrics overview tab.
Regent Krause.
Madam Chair, could I ask a quick question? Sorry. And that is, that's in the community colleges column on the one page we run. So we've got current operated unrestricted down, current restricted down, current designated down. I understand the plant fund is a building, but auxiliary enterprises up 6% when all of the activity is down. I know that's not a big percentage, but it's an anomaly, and I just wondered if you had an answer.
Regent Krause, I don't have a specific answer for you right now, but we do have the campus presidents that will be speaking to you later today.
I don't want you to answer it right now.
Oh, all right. We can get some research and get back to you.
I'll probably ask questions, and in general with giant numbers, you're not gonna pull that right out of there. But at some point in time, it'd be nice to get an answer. Thank you.
So if we move to the budget metric overview tab, and if we could click on the BUD 200 link. The BUD 200, this particular form is sort of an automated form that comes out of the university system financial data warehouse, which was created about, I think it's about 6 to 7 years ago now. Prior to this, we were doing a lot of these budget sheets manually, and with the help of campus representatives, etc., there was a development of this automated budget tool that has greatly streamlined the process. The BUD 200, again, this is the current unrestricted fund for the 8 educational units for the Montana University system. And I just want to point out just a couple of pieces on this. The total salaries and benefits, you can see, account for about 73% of the total budget expenditures for this particular fund. The operating expenditures, about 24%, and then we do have some miscellaneous expenditures focused on capital equipment, and there's some activity regarding transfers out. We do have 3 reserve funds, a termination retirement payout reserve fund. We have a scholarship reserve fund and a revolving reserve fund. And so campuses will occasionally plan on transferring dollars to those reserve funds with the ability to bring those into the current operating fund at a later point for use in terms of expenditures. The total increase, again, at the bottom is 5.27%. We saw that increase at 5% on the previous slide also. So the key point, I think, we are in the current unrestricted fund, we are a labor-intensive business. 73% of our total expenditures are focused on salaries and benefits for our employees. Moving along, I'd like to click on the expenditures per FTE tab. This particular calculation, it's an important calculation. It's used nationally in a lot of comparisons, peer comparisons, etc. And it's simply a computation of taking sort of our ongoing expenditures. We do remove one-time only appropriations from our expenditure total, and we divide it by the total number of FTE, student FTE, and we come up with an average. Now, you do have to be careful with this average. It's called expenditures per FTE, and but it can be moved by either an increase in expenditure or a change in the number of students. And just as an example, I'm going to use Dawson Community College as an example. For the 3 years, 11, 12, and 13, the total expenditures at Dawson really did not change dramatically, but what's really changed is more the enrollment. And if you look at the actual enrollment for fiscal year 11 at Dawson was 419 FTE, and in fiscal year 12, their actual enrollment declined to 365. So you'll notice the upward movement of the expenditures per FTE is being driven by a drop in enrollment, not so much an increase in expenditures. So, you know, as you look at this metric, you do have to make sure you understand the relationship in terms of where the enrollment might be moving. Most of the campuses, you see, have fairly flat growth rate over the period of time that we're looking at here. In fact, the average is 1.1%, so there hasn't been much of a change in terms of growth in expenditures per FTE. And lately, the last 2 or 3 years, the total enrollment, as we'll see on a future slide, has been fairly flat for the last 2 or 3 years in terms of total, although there are changes, certainly changes in particular campuses. The campuses, as part of their presentations, will also be referring to a lot of these metrics, and we'll have a little more specific discussion of those elements. As we look quickly at this per student funding metric, this is a metric that, as I've spent more time with it this year, I think we need to work on changing it. In the past, what we've looked at with this metric is the recognition that non-resident students, especially at the Bozeman campus and the Missoula campus, do provide a subsidy. The total tuition that is generated by those particular students is in excess of the net expenditures for those students. So it does generate a subsidy. I think we have to be a little bit careful in terms of whether we're calculating that subsidy on a sort of a gross tuition or a gross computation, which is included here, or a net computation. But for the Bozeman and Missoula campuses, I think the key factor here is to recognize that that non-resident students are a positive contributor to those particular campuses in terms of providing additional resources for the operation and the educational experience of those students. There are some factors in that we're missing. We don't have the WUI tuition factored in, so there's some adjustments that we have to make and work on. I started to work on it just before the meeting about a month ago, and I thought, well, we better hold off and spend a little more time on that as we redo a metric. On all of these metrics, we did ask the campuses to respond to particular questions, and we do have the responses that connected or linked to the various metrics, but we're not going to go into those during this meeting. It may be that some of the campus CEOs will combine some of those responses in their presentations. Moving to the next metric, the enrollment and revenue. The BUD 300, if we could click on that, the BUD 300 is the revenue side of the current unrestricted fund. And you'll notice the bottom line for this particular report, the bottom line for fiscal year 13 is equal to the expenditure side. So the revenues are equal to the expenditures, projected expenditures. A couple of key points to notice. Looking at the first percentage column, percentage of total budgets, always the recognition of the relationship of tuition and fees to state funding. On this particular report, the tuition and fees account for 58% of the total current unrestricted funding. The state funding, which includes some one-time only appropriations, is about 39% of the funding. And then we have some miscellaneous components of the funding relationship. Just a point to note for looking at the state allocations as you compare fiscal year 12 to fiscal year 13, the state allocations went down slightly in terms of the state appropriations flowing to the educational units for the Montana University system. If we could take a look at the enrollment link, enrollment tab, we have three different reports that we have connected here, three different pages. We do have a report that presents the total enrollment, and just looking at the total, and it's the first presentation shows the resident number, non-resident, and WUI. And you'll notice that for the last 3 years, for 11, 12, and budgeted for 13, the enrollment is fairly flat. Although for this 5-year period, 6-year period, the enrollment growth has been 3% over that period. So fairly significant growth taking place from 9 to 10 and 10 to 11, and it's kind of leveled off from that point. You can see the relationship in terms of resident, non-resident. Resident account for 78% of the total enrollment within the university system. And then a breakdown between undergraduate, graduate, the 2-year colleges, and community colleges presented there. And then the next 2 pages, which I will not go into, present detail by campus, also based on either resident or non-resident, or whether or not undergraduate or graduate. the last metric that I'm going to comment on and then throw it over to Tyler Trevor is the instructional expenditures. And if we can click on the expenditures by program tab, some of the targets that we have used within the university system relate to these various program categories, and these program categories are categories that come from the National Association of College University Budget Officers. We include, from an accounting standpoint, all of the expenditures that we would have within the current unrestricted, and we try to categorize those within these different groupings. We look to focus the instruction expenditure level at a 50% goal. And you can look at the various campuses and connect to that 50% goal. We also have a goal stated in the Board of Regents strategic plan that would indicate that instruction, academic support, and student services would have a goal of 70%. And so you can see the subtotal in terms of that particular relationship. The other point that I normally look at is institutional support would probably be considered probably the major overhead category for a campus. And I'd like to see that 10% or below. And you can see from the top presentation, most of those are below 10% or right around 10%. As you move to the two-year campus presentation, at the bottom of the page, again, you've got the 50%, you've got the 70%, you have the institutional support categories there. They're at least the president will those campus CEOs across the system will respond to this metric as part of their presentation. So here we have them. I wanted to make a comparison so you would have some percentages to look at for all of the various campuses. So with that, Madam Chair, I would certainly be available for any questions and turn it over to Tyler Trevor for the last two metrics that are presented.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments at this point? Okay, then we'll turn to you, Mr. Trevor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you can remember from past Regents meetings, we've been working on dashboard indicators. We have those in college participation, retention, financial aid. And then last September, we did one on cost per completion. And so this is an effort this year to tie these dashboards, a couple new ones, in fact, into our budget metrics. So that's why I'm presenting on these. And this first one, if you can back up one there, Amy, and click on operating budget ratios. We kind of gave the campuses a leading question here and asked them to really provide the detail, and that's what Deputy Commissioner Robinson has been referring to, and the campuses will be really giving you some real detail related to their trends. But the question is compare and contrast your campus trends within the following ratios: student to faculty ratios, student to admin and professional ratios, and student to classified staff ratios. And what are some of the reasons why your trends have been changing? What I can do for you is kind of give you the 30,000-foot view of where we're at on this. And I'll have Amy open the details so you can look at it while I'm talking to you about the overall analysis and some of the finer points. So that middle link right there, Amy, perfect. And it couldn't be any more of a detailed spreadsheet to look at on screen, and I apologize for that. And hopefully some of this will simplify that. And really what you need here is to say what's good and what's bad. And that's a real difficult thing to say in terms of student to faculty ratios, in terms of student to admin and professional ratios, especially when we haven't done much system analysis on this in the past. So I dove in head first and kind of created my own benchmarks. We could argue with them, but what it does is it serves to at least give us some idea of where various campuses are at. We can have a discussion and let the campuses talk to you about whether that's good or bad. This is more of just something to call to your attention. I wouldn't call it good or bad. At times I call it high or low. But first with student to faculty, student to contract faculty ratios. And that means all faculty, full and part-time. It's their total FTE. Took a look at, well, what campus might be on the high end of that? For instance, above 25 student FTE per faculty FTE. Say the average is about 18. And we had one. That was the Helena College. Their ratios have fluctuated between about 22 and 28 over the past 5 years. And I think Dean Bingham will expand upon this, but it has a direct relationship to his growing student enrollment and not an expanding faculty that he has to work with. And so, well, is that good or bad? It's definitely efficient, I can tell you that. So then let's look on the other end of the continuum. And maybe, Amy, you can scroll with me as I hit on these ones. Below 15 student FTE per faculty FTE. And remember, I say about 18 is the average. And I think that you might hear some of the presidents and chancellors talk about kind of what the national ratio is here. And I think 18 might be kind of what folks manage to. We look at MSU Northern. Their ratio was 15 in FY12, and they're budgeting for 14 this fiscal year. Not a big deal, but it's just something you might take a look at. Miles Community College, their ratio has been below 13 for the past 5 years, and they're budgeting for 10.7 this fiscal year. So that might be something that catch your attention. So moving on from student to faculty ratios to student to contract admin and professional ratios. So how many? So as you're, one thing I should note, and it's sort of counterintuitive, as the number goes up, right, that means you have more students per administrator. And as the number goes down, obviously, that you have more administrators per student. So I set a benchmark of 80. And this is me just looking at the data and kind of giving my own ranges here. How many campuses do we have above 80 student FTE per admin and professional staff? And there was one, and it was Missoula. Now, keep in mind, you have different classifications of employees, so you also have to look at classified staff when you're doing this. And right now, we're looking at an isolation of just admin, student per admin and professional. Now, their ratio has decreased. They've been making progress on this from 94 to about 89, over the last 5 years, and they're budgeting for 81. So they're bringing it down, which is probably a good thing, and they need to do that. However, it's still a lot higher than everybody else's. So, again, is this good or bad? And I think that's why we wanted President Engstrom to address this specifically. And then on the flip side of that, you say, okay, what campuses are below 40 student FTE? So half of what UM was at. Students per admin and professional staff. And we see Northern, they've dipped to 32 and are about 33 for this budget year. Dawson has a ratio between 30 and 35 over the past 5 years. Flathead Valley has ranged between 36 and 44, so they're just kind of right on the cusp of my arbitrary line I drew here. And Miles Community College ranged between 18 to 25 over the last 5 years, and they're budgeting for 21 this fiscal year. So this is new to us to look at these and kind of give you a flavor for, well, how's your students doing in relationship to the number of administrators you have? And granted, small campuses are going to have a harder time with this. You have to have base foundation of administrators. But looking at it over time, within that campus, what are the trends? Okay, enough said there. Student FTE to classified employee ratios. I drew a line here of above 40. So you have 40 students per classified staff. There might be some pressure created here on your support staff. What campuses fell into this category? And Helena College was the first one that jumped out. They're between 32 and 40 over the past 5 years. They get a little better here recently at 34. But they're have traditionally been a little on the high side there. And Flathead Valley, absolutely. And you kind of got to look at these in relation to the one that we just reviewed, which was student FTE to contract admin and professional, because campuses classify people in different categories. So if you're high in both categories or low in both categories, you might think there might be an issue there. So, and then we have Miles at 47. They're probably the highest in the system, or close to it. And then who's on the low side? And I drew a line of 20, and there wasn't anybody. UM came the closest at 22. And you know, remember I told you that they were the highest on the admin, so maybe there's a little bit of a difference of a classification there. But I'm not so sure it's enough to make up the 80 students to every one admin. I think that would be a question that you might want to address with the University of Montana. So hopefully this type of system analysis helps. This again is new, and if you look at the detail there, we also provided the spending on instruction per FTE and the percent from that previous metric. You can't look at things in isolation. There's a series of indicators that you have to look at before you can get an idea about the direction a campus is going. And I want to remind everyone of that you know, I'm doing a real compartmental job here to try to make things black and white, but you have to look at them all in totality. So the campuses, again, provide written responses to this, and you'll see it in their presentations, and it'll give you a great opportunity to ask them questions about these operating budget ratios. And hopefully we continue to expand upon this, and this is going to be a good tool for the board coming down the line.
Commissioner Christian.
Madam Chair, just one thing I might add, and I talked about this a little bit on the conference call when we talked about adding these ratios, but again, I think Tyler said you can't look at them in isolation, but what I think for me is more valuable is you can look at the trends for each school. As you look at the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years and the projected, you can get a sense of what direction an institution is going. And the numbers are pretty relevant that way because we haven't had a lot of switches in terms of how we categorize things. But it's not very useful yet, and maybe it will become more over time, but I really want to caution you to compare institutions to institutions because we clearly don't account for them the same, and there's a big discrepancy between classified staff and professional staff. So that's going to be hard to track. The point, I guess, in developing these is less about comparing the institutions and more about comparing the trend of those individual institutions over time. And hopefully it will be very helpful with that. And, as we move forward in the years to come, we can try to make these more relevant as they compare to institution to institution. But for now, I think that's the real value of what we have going here.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the board?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just had one. With regard to whatever it might be, whatever ratio disturbs you, in the group, it could. If we just focus on that, it could be quite possible you could start gaming it. I mean, I think, one of the things you could do is say, boy, we got too many professionals down there in Bozeman. So let's go hire some, let's go contract out a bunch of that. I mean, you could have some pretty dire consequences if you focused on the one statistic. And so it is a good thing to look at, but you don't want to jump off the deep end on one statistic, one metric.
Point taken, and I think it's a starting point for us as a board, and I think for the campuses to know where they stand. But point well taken. I agree. Commissioner Christian.
Madam Chair, yeah, I agree as well. And one of the things that sort of has led us to this more in-depth analysis is to try to figure out, we are sort of as a system and have been for a while struggling to hit the 50 and the 70 benchmarks, which are in board policy. And it's part of what started this is why. Where are the discrepancies? And those numbers can be gamed as well, so we don't want to put too much emphasis on those. Exactly what you're saying, Regent Krause, you could hire the wrong people and help your numbers, but it doesn't help students. And so we're trying to drive a little bit of this on a more of a student level and faculty level, and so we could see where maybe those students are better served or underserved and some of those things to help us identify that trend. But ultimately, I would like to see us try to hone this tool and others to find ways that we can hold our campuses responsible to get back to the 50 and 70% benchmarks and do it with quality that ultimately helps students, not just placates our need for the numbers to be where the numbers are at.
Commissioner Regent Krause.
And thank you, not to dominate the conversation, but, as we establish goals for performance budgeting, as we've established some campus-wide goals, they may not all be looking at these kinds of metrics. They will be looking at metrics that are less part of efficiency or those kind of things, and more part of here's some goals we set, how far along, how many, of this kind of student did you add, whatever it might be. And so, we'll have this is a great effort, and I appreciate the effort it took to gather and report. But I think, lacking some ties, the goals to, once we get that kind of overall performance goal in, I think then these will be golden kinds of statistics for us at that point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the board? I just want to say that this was a process, and the budget piece that will take place this afternoon was really a conversation that began with the commissioner's office and then had significant input from each of the campuses as it rolled out. And I thank everyone who played a part in that conversation, who participated through emails and then ultimately through the conference call to shape what the conversation this afternoon would look like. So, did you have something else?
Yeah, Madam Chair, we have one more on cost per completion. I could touch on it real quickly. Amy, if you back up there one, and click on the bottom link. This is a dashboard we did last year. It's a modified version of it. We asked campuses to describe their trends in expenditures per completion as they related to their campus, and to compare those trends, system-wide figures and regional averages, and identify some of the primary driving forces behind them. And really, this is a national metric that relates to the completion agenda. And it says, nationally, we've heard, and not just from the president, but major educational leaders like Lumina, that we need to produce more completions, and we need to do it efficiently. And so this is one measure of that. Again, as I dovetail on Madam Chair's comments and Regent Krause, this is an evolving process. These metrics are looking to find a home. Last year, they just stood by themselves. And so this year, they're related to our operating budget. Maybe next year, they'll play a more integral role, and we can refine them so they're more useful for really a management tool. With that said, they are not perfect, and definitely this one has some caveats related to it. Campuses that have had explosive enrollment recently generated more revenue, spent more as a result, won't fare as well, because we're looking at a year's snapshot of your expenditures and your completions. The completions took 4 years or more, and so you got to take that into consideration when you look at this. You really got to look at trends over time. And the other component of this is when we look at this, we're looking at campus, all the completions on a campus. University of Montana is a good example of this. They have all of the completions for their 2-year education in there. The certificates, the 2-year degrees, the baccalaureate degrees, the graduate degrees, the professional degrees. It's the whole conglomerate of their completions. And one of the reasons that they're all packaged together like that is really that's how they operate. I couldn't tell you the expenditures that related just to the 2-year from the data that I have. And so be careful when you compare campuses on this, because it really is truly unique to each one of the campuses. Although when you compare to the regional averages in the area, things get smoothed over because you have so many campuses in there. But it's just something to be aware of. Amy, if you can back up one and go to the detail, and I'll have these guys look at the detail while I'm giving them some of just the top highlights here. I'm going to blow that up for us a little bit. So for the system, cost or expenditures per completion have increased from $44,000 in 06 to $50,000 in 12. Now that doesn't involve inflation in there. So if you controlled for inflation, you would not see that growth trend there. And I'd say from 44 to 50 over a 6-year period of time, not doing too bad. Go ahead. Yep, it's everything. And so obviously, a 1-year certificate, the person's there only 1 year, it should cost the campus less. However, you got to say some of those certificates, and Deputy Sec could tell us this, that they're awful expensive in the equipment that is related to them. So you kind of have to. It's a full. This is a 30,000-foot view of this. The campuses can provide you a lot more detail related to the trends that go on here. So then I looked at from 08 to 09 cost per completion as a system. You know, we've remained pretty steady. Amy, if you could back up one, and click on the summary. There you go. So if you take a look for the last 4 years, 50, 52, 50, 50. I mean, so that means what's happened there is we know our expenditures have increased slightly across the campus, if at all, in some years. But we know that our completions have grown. From I know from 10 to 11, we increased by 6% across the system, and we know we've contributed to the increasing. We've seen those reports nationally that Montana led the nation in the terms of the percent of the population with a degree, with associate's degree or higher. Well, we know we're direct contributors to that, given the fact we're producing more and we're doing it efficiently. I would say from this overall system view of this. Now, for each campus, it ranges. System-wide, cost per completions increased 15% from 06 to 2012. We definitely have some leaders in this area in terms of keeping that amount down. In fact, how about decreasing it? Take a look at Great Falls College. They went from 43,000 per completion to 27,000 per completion for a negative 37%. They increased the amount of output that they had, no doubt about it. Their expenditures probably were flat, if not, maybe a slight increase. There's a little bit of a nuance in there. They moved some of their operations to the Gallatin College, but whether or not that's in there or not, it doesn't make a difference. These guys produce more. And then you look at Billings, they're right up there, -5. They decreased. Helena basically been flat over that time. They kind of went up a mountain, then back down. And then we look at those on the flip side of that, which is campuses with the greatest increases in cost per completion. We have Dawson going from 29,000 in 06 to 40,000 for a 39% increase. Northern 38 to 52. And again, campuses are going to have a chance to talk specifically about these with you this afternoon. And then Miles going from 31 to 41 for a 33% increase. And so that basically concludes my overview. I would mention again, none of this can be looked at in isolation. These are performance indicators. They're indications of performance, and you need to group a bunch of them together to get an idea of what's happening. This one kind of points directly at that completion agenda. We certainly, when you start talking about performance-based funding, there's a whole host of different types of metrics like these. I mean, we can go all the way back to cohort analysis of graduation rates, and I'm sure you'll hear the campuses talk about that today in retention. I don't mean to discard those whatsoever. This one, just looking to find a place, and it seems like the operating budget metrics are that place. Madam Chair, that concludes my report. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board?
Well, I did have one question. Thank you. We're in numbers, so we'll get over into something I don't know anything about later. So I was just trying to figure out this number. Okay, I'm just going to take Missoula, 49,874 in 2011 and 2012. Yes. That number is just the number of people who graduated divided by that year's expenses?
Yep, divided into the expenditures.
Divided into that year's expenses.
Amy, if you could back up one and then hit the detail. What I should have said on this is what's most interesting about this is the detail. And I gave you 1 year of it here, but for you, Regent Krause, I probably should have provided all 5 or 6. Because if you take a look at what affects the ratio? There's 2 things: the expenditures, or the amount of expenditures, or the number of completions. So what's changing here? I mean, for me to say that to you about Great Falls, that means I know some of the detail that I'm not showing you. Right. So I'm showing you 1 year here. And if you look for Missoula, you can see they had 72 certificates, 338 associate degrees, 1,800, and so on and so forth, for 3,013 total completions. Now, there's things going on in there over a 5-6 year period of time where maybe baccalaureate degrees have gone up or down, and maybe it's the 2 year that's producing. What is it that's changing this? And that changes for you the idea of that number that is the final output, and also then comparing the difference in the current unrestricted expenditures. So it can be. It looks on its face is very black and white and simple, but underneath it, the detail is really where it counts.
Thank you.
Regent Buchanan.
I like how you probe in Regent Cross. Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have data or the ability to compile the data to see where those completion rates are growing the fastest? As that compares to 06, 07, one, I'd like to know what the completion rates were then. And two, where has the growth been? And not specific to UM Missoula, but I think as we look at these expenditures that we're making, these are investments. And in my opinion, we should be funneling investments where the successes are occurring at the greatest rate. And so some of that data to explore would be, I definitely think, worth some of our discussion as we talk about allocation issues and performance-based funding moving forward. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Regent Buchanan, we definitely have the detailed data. We have the historical data behind this, and it depends on what type of rate you want to calculate, whether it's a comparison of enrollment to completions, expenditures to completion, graduation rates within particular areas. Absolutely.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, then everyone's ready for the conversation this afternoon. We will recess now until 1 o'clock. See you all back then.